November 12th, 1944. Camp 23, Devizes, Wiltshire. Dawn hadn't broken yet. It shattered the silence. Imagine the chill of a November morning biting through timber walls as thin as paper. Then rap, rap, rap. 3 knocks, hard and metallic, echoed like gunfire through the barracks. Sharp, intentional. They weren't just sounds, they were a summons. Greta Hoffmann's lungs seized. She had been lying still for hours, staring up at the ceiling beams, those rough cross struts overhead that had become her only view of the world. Around her, the breath of 31 other women stirred the darkness, soft murmurs, rustling limbs, the occasional suppressed sob. But now, the sound they all feared had arrived. Boots crunched on gravel outside. A latch scraped. Voices murmured low, clipped, unmistakably English. Greta clutched her blanket tighter around her neck. Wehrmacht issue, rough wool, full of burrs and memory. It scratched at her skin, but it was all she had. The air in the barracks was thick, damp timber, sweat-soaked fear, the ripe staleness of too many women packed in too small a space. Somewhere nearby, a whimper escaped. She closed her eyes. So this is it, she thought. This is when the reckoning comes. They had been warned. From the moment they were taken, the specter of retribution had followed them. British anger, they'd been told, would not be restrained forever. What would you have believed in her place? Would you have trusted the whispered tales told during long hours in the hold of a transport ship, the ones that spoke of punishment, humiliation, vengeance for Coventry and London, for dead children and bombed-out churches? The door slammed open. Cold light flooded in. 3 figures filled the threshold. British soldiers, uniforms immaculate despite the early hour, boots polished, postures precise. The tallest, a sergeant with gray creeping into his temples, held a heavy bundle in his arms. Greta's stomach turned to ice. She remembered the films shown back in training graphic warnings of what awaited captured Axis troops, especially women, the way those reels had dripped with doom, starvation, disgrace. Worse. The sergeant's voice cut through the tension like wire. Aufstehen, he said in deliberate German. Alle in Reihe und Glied. Up, all of you. Line formation. And so they rose. 32 women clambered from their bunks, some still clad in the same crusted, mud-slick uniforms they'd been wearing for 6 days ever since processing. Greta took her place between Margot Weber, once a switchboard operator in Hamburg, captured in Normandy, and Annalisa Schaefer, a 23-year-old auxiliary nurse seized when the hospital at Caen fell in July. They'd shared names and stories across the channel on a converted freighter that lurched like a dying animal through rough waters, the hold stinking of vomit and diesel. No one had eaten more than a bowl of watery potato soup in nearly 3 days. The sergeant stepped forward. The bundle unfolded. Thick wool, intact. A coat dark, flannel-lined, with real buttons that gleamed in the morning light. British Army regulation, winter issue. He held it out, not harshly, not kindly, but with the plain, impassive authority of a man completing his task. The first to receive it was Frida, a clerk from a supply depot. Her hands shook as she reached for it. Nimbus, he said. Take it. Not a command, a fact. Then came the others. 2 privates followed, arms stacked with similar garments, coat after coat distributed down the line. Within minutes, each woman held one. And that's when the tears came. Quiet at first, stifled behind sleeves. Some women began crying before they'd even tried the coats on. Greta slid hers over her shoulders. The weight startled her. She had forgotten what it felt like to wear something whole, something that fit, that protected, that hadn't been scavenged or shared. The wool held a lingering warmth from storage, and when she brought the collar to her face, she smelled soap, clean soap, and then her throat closed. This isn't what we were told would happen. This wasn't the script of vengeance and degradation. The sergeant added with the same stoic efficiency, there's breakfast in the mess, porridge, tea, come when you're ready. And just like that, the sergeant was gone. The door clicked shut behind him. Stillness lingered in his wake, thick and unreal. No one moved, not at first. Then it began. Annalisa laughed, A jagged, broken laugh, too high, too sharp. It cracked like glass underfoot and dissolved into sobs she couldn't hold back. Margot collapsed onto her bunk, clutching the coat against her chest as though it might vanish if she let go. Greta stood rigid, as if the world had tilted on its side and left her unsure of up or down. What had just happened? They had recoiled in terror at a knock. Now they wept over woolen buttons. It was absurd. It was human. And it changed something fundamental, because these weren't soldiers in the traditional sense. They hadn't stormed trenches or manned machine guns. These were the women who oiled the gears of the Wehrmacht's massive war machine from the rear lines. Support personnel, not shock troops. Greta had typed requisition orders in a supply depot near Carentan. Anneliese had patched up wounds in a field hospital. Margot had handled the invisible lifelines of war radio transmissions, routing signals from mobile switchboards. But in Normandy, that didn't matter. The Allied armies had swept across the countryside with the unrelenting force of a rising tide. And when that tide reached the women in gray uniforms, it did not pause to ask what they had done. Uniforms meant guilt. Papers meant proof. That was enough. Greta could still see it in her mind's eye, July 17th, late afternoon, the depot a husk of its former order. The officers had disappeared 2 days earlier, fleeing with the last trucks and whatever provisions they could carry. She'd been sitting at her desk, hands hovering over the typewriter, weighing her options. Run into uncertainty or stay and risk the worst. And then they arrived. American soldiers, rifles slung, accents thick with southern drawl. Oklahoma, maybe. Young men chewing gum and cracking jokes like it was another training drill. They didn't scream. They didn't strike. They searched her, checked her documents, then moved her along one more entry in the unending calculus of war. A truck waited outside. 11 women climbed aboard. No drama, no cruelty, just logistics. The processing point had been a commandeered schoolhouse near Bayeux. There, the full weight of defeat settled in. Hundreds of prisoners crowded the grounds, most of them men in smeared blood-stiff uniforms, faces blank with exhaustion. The women were separated quickly, herded into a classroom below ground, the air thick with mildew. 4 days they spent in that stone box, sleeping on the floor, sharing 2 metal buckets for sanitation. An RAF officer had come by, once clipped mustache, pale eyes that never quite met theirs. He spoke halting German, asked for names and ranks, and handed over documents they couldn't read. They signed them anyway. Then came the trucks, then the coast, then the ship. A freighter meant for cargo, not people. The crossing to Southampton lasted 6 days, though it felt far longer. The hold reeked of rust, vomit, diesel, and dread. When they arrived, the orderliness stunned Greta. No shouting, no shoving. Just endless rows, alphabetical lists, and British nurses who moved through the prisoners with clinical precision, checking hair for lice, eyes for illness. They were photographed, fingerprinted, given ration cards, provisional and impersonal. Then came the train north. Steam carriages, windows broken or fogged with grime. The English countryside slid by in streaks of damp gray. Hills rolled like sighs. Sheep dotted the fields in surreal stillness. It was November, and nothing looked like home. Not France, not Germany. Camp 23 came into view just as dusk fell. They had arrived only the day before. Bone-tired, starving, terrified that the worst was yet to come. Instead, coats, then breakfast. And now this, tea served in actual cups, each with a handle intact. The mess hall had once been a Nissan hut, long and rounded like a half-buried tunnel. A coal stove burned at one end, throwing waves of heat that stopped Greta in her tracks. She hesitated in the doorway, heat on her face. Then smell. Porridge. Thick, rich porridge with milk. And beneath it, bread. Freshly baked. Her stomach twisted in agony at the scent. Beside her, Anneliese made a soft, aching sound. Half sob, half gasp. Behind the serving table stood British soldiers. Not guards, not tormentors, just men with ladles, scooping steaming portions into bowls. The line moved forward. Greta clutched a bowl of porridge, a slice of brown bread, a tin cup of tea so hot it burned through the metal. She found a seat at a long wooden table among the others. stared at the food in disbelief. Margot was the first to try a bite, cautious, tentative, like it might be poisoned. Then something in her broke. She bent over her bowl and ate with a desperate focus, tears rolling silently down her face. Greta forced herself to chew, to breathe between bites. The oats tasted of salt and real butter. Honest butter, not the waxy ersatz fat they'd known in Germany since 1942. And the bread, dense, faintly sweet, was nothing like the sawdust bricks rationed in Berlin. This, Greta realized, was food, and she had forgotten food could taste like this, forgotten what it felt like to feel full. At the far end of the hall, a British corporal wound up a gramophone. Jazz drifted from the speaker horn. American music. The kind of sound that, in Stuttgart, could have earned you a denunciation. Maybe a midnight knock. Maybe worse. Yet no one in the mess hall made a move to shut it off. The gramophone spun on, lazily broadcasting American jazz, the very rhythm once labeled degenerate by the Reich's cultural guardians. And still, the corporal cleaning tin cups at the wash basin simply nodded along, as if this tune belonged here, as if it had always belonged. "Why?" Annalisa whispered. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from something stranger. Bewilderment. Greta had no answer. Everything they'd been told had painted a very different picture. The British, the Americans, they were meant to be barbarians in uniform, wild with rage, twisted by Bolshevism, corrupted by Jews hell-bent on revenge. That was the narrative hammered into them in briefings, posters, newsreels. These were the monsters who would make them pay for every Allied death, every German bomb that fell on London, every U-boat strike in the Atlantic. Greta had half believed it, as she lay on the transport ship, curled in darkness while steel waves battered the hull. She had braced herself for cruelty, for punishment, for payback. Instead, porridge, coats, jazz music. And now a British sergeant asking in careful, accented German if anyone needed a doctor. The camp settled into a rhythm over the next days. A rhythm so shockingly normal, it seemed unhinged. There were barracks blocks, actual bunks, mattresses filled with horsehair, blankets that were warm, whole, and free of lice. The latrines had plumbing, cold water, yes, but water that flowed from a pipe, not a bucket. A clinic staffed by a British doctor and a Welsh nurse who didn't speak a word of German, yet smiled kindly as they handed out aspirin. On the fourth day came the work assignments. Nothing brutal, no forced labor. Some women sorted linens in the laundry. Others peeled potatoes or chopped carrots in the kitchens. Greta was sent to the camp office, typing requisition forms, just as she had done at the Wehrmacht supply depot. Only now the header read, British Army, Western Command. The typewriter was an Imperial. The keys stuck slightly, but it worked. Her desk sat beside a window that looked out over the parade ground. She watched November rain smear the earth into slick brown mud as she typed lists of tents and boots, lamp oil and canvas. It was dreamlike, surreal, a loop of familiarity inside a world that had turned upside down. The truth about POW camps might defy everything you thought you knew. Click like if these stories make you rethink history, and let us know in the comments, which camp should we uncover next? But back to Camp 23. The food remained a daily mystery. Not opulent, not luxurious, but steady, predictable. Porridge for breakfast, occasionally, blessedly, with jam. Lunch, soup lentil, sometimes vegetable with a slice of bread and a pat of margarine. Dinner brought potatoes, now and then a bit of corned beef, once even baked beans and tomato sauce. Nothing extravagant, but it came every day. Far more than Greta had eaten in Germany during the previous winter. Far more than the average Berliner had seen since the bombing intensified. Margot, ever meticulous, began counting calories under her breath, whispering numbers into the dark like prayers or curses. They couldn't reconcile this with what they'd expected. It was as though the enemy had misread their part in the war's theater. Annalisa started a diary. She begged paper scraps from the office, hoarded pencil stubs like gold. Sometimes after lights out, she'd read aloud, her voice small, intimate. November 19th, 1944. Today the Welsh nurse gave me real penicillin for my finger. It was infected. She cleaned it with such care, bandaged it in gauze. Told me to come back tomorrow. I don't understand. They told us the Allies would let us rot, that they'd want us to die from small wounds. But she smiled at me. She touched my hand like I was human. Greta never interrupted when Annalise read. None of them did. The days began to pile up like falling leaves. December arrived. With it came frost, cloudless skies, and the first glint of something approaching routine. They were permitted 1 letter per month. Censored, of course, but still. Real letters. Greta wrote to her mother in Berlin. She kept her words carefully bland. I am healthy. I am safe. No mention of the extra blanket. No hint of the daily rations. No reference to the 4 pounds she'd gained in just 3 weeks. Would her mother believe it? Could she believe it? And then, a new shift. The British Guards began to speak. Stilted conversations. Halting German, broken English. Corporal Davies was the first. He showed Greta a photograph sepia increased. His wife and daughter in Cardiff. The bombings hit us too, he said softly. Lost my brother in Africa. Then after a pause. But you didn't kill him, did you? You were typing papers. He shrugged and tucked the photo back into his pocket. War's not on you, love. War's on the bastards who started it. Greta said nothing. What could she say? She had voted for the party in '33. She had nodded along when the rallies called for strength. She had looked away when the Jewish neighbors disappeared from her block. Not your concern, she had told herself. But now that past weighed on her like lead. Davies's forgiveness. Not on you, love. Felt almost obscene. Too easy. And yet, a part of her wanted to believe it, desperately. It was Margot who changed first, and that perhaps was the most unexpected transformation of all. She had once been the firebrand among them, the true believer. A Bund Deutscher Mädel leader before the war, Margot had marched and shouted and saluted with conviction. Her voice had carried at rallies. Her eyes had gleamed when she spoke of duty, purity, destiny. To her, the Reich had stood not just as a government, but as a bulwark against collapse, the last civilized rampart before the deluge of Bolshevism, liberalism, and racial chaos. But Margot was also the daughter of an engineer. She had been raised on numbers, data, observable fact. She respected evidence, and now evidence was piling up around her with quiet persistence. The mail delivery worked. Medical care was consistent. The guards were not monsters. They were, more often than not, simply bored, sometimes even kind, but never cruel. And then came Frida, pale, fevered, coughing blood. She had collapsed in the barracks in early December. Pneumonia, the nurse said. In another context, in another war, that diagnosis might have been a death sentence. But Frida wasn't left to die. She was transferred out of the wire and into town to a civilian hospital, where sulfanilamide and careful hands brought her back from the brink. 5 days later, she returned, alive, whole, discharge papers in hand. She sat on her bunk, eyes wide, voice low. They saved my life, she said. They didn't have to, but they did. Margot said nothing, not for hours, not for days. She folded into herself, lips pressed thin, her expression like stone grinding against itself. She stopped speaking in the mess hall. Her food went uneaten. Her coat remained neatly buttoned, as though it were armor. And then, on the 3rd day, she approached Greta. In the mess hall, face pale, shoulders taut, voice shaking with something deeper than fear. It was all lies, she said. Everything they told us. Lies. The British aren't monsters. The Americans aren't savages. We were the monsters. Her voice rose, cracked. We bombed their cities. We murdered their people. And we were the savages all along. Greta sat frozen, the bowl before her full of lentil soup, untouched. She wanted to argue, wanted to mount a defense. Surely not all. Surely it wasn't so simple. But nothing came. No rebuttal, no shield. She thought instead of the depot near Carentan, the requisition forms she had typed, shells, bullets, boots, blankets. The machinery of war she had oiled with keystrokes. She thought of her mother's letters from Berlin, of how, after 1938, Herr Rosenberg's name, once in every story, simply vanished. No goodbye, no explanation, only silence. And now here she sat, wrapped in a warm British coat, with bread in her stomach, listening to jazz. Captivity had shown her more humanity than allegiance ever had. Greta looked up at Margot and whispered what felt like a confession. Yes, we were. Then came Christmas, and with it, the unthinkable, ceremony. The camp commandant, Lieutenant Colonel Hartley, was a man of few smiles, his posture stiff with fatigue, his hair thinning at the temples. But in mid-December, he had a small evergreen brought into the mess hall, a Christmas tree. Soon, decorations followed, paper chains carefully folded by prisoners, a few old glass baubles donated by townswomen from devises, tin holders with wax candles. On Christmas Eve, permission was granted. Carols. The women chose cautiously. Nothing triumphalist, no anthems, just one song, one they all knew. Stille Nacht, Silent Night. It began as a whisper, a hesitant unison, but soon the melody found them. Greta stood among them, her voice small at first, then steadier. Annalisa sang harmony clear and sure, the product of choir training in a Red Cross hospital. Margot's voice broke, and she wept silently, her tears soaking the collar of her coat. At the back stood a British chaplain, elderly, white-haired, his eyes kind. He did not interrupt. When the final note faded, he stepped forward and spoke in slow, careful German. God hears all prayers, he said, even from those who think he stopped listening, especially from them. Dinner came next. And what a dinner it was! Roasted chicken, real chicken, a breast, halved and portioned, still warm, still seasoned, boiled potatoes and carrots. A thick slice of Christmas pudding rich with dried fruit and soaked in brandy. Greta stared at the plate before her like it was a relic from another life. She ate slowly, reverently, every bite a miracle, every chew a defiance of expectation. She thought of Berlin, of the air raids, the rubble, the ration lines. This, she realized, was a gift, a deliberate gesture of humanity that crossed barbed wire and ideology. It made her want to weep, or laugh, or scream. She did none of those things. She simply ate. After the meal, Corporal Davies returned to their table. He carried a deck of cards and a grin. Right then, he said, time you learned to play something useful. He taught them rummy, and the women of Camp 23, once soldiers of a fallen Reich, played cards with their captors by candlelight on Christmas night, 1944. A British trick-taking game, simple in theory, cunning in execution. They played at a table in the barracks, the line between captor and captive dissolving like chalk and water. Guards and prisoners mingled without ceremony. Davies explained the rules in fractured German, gesturing with cards, pantomiming strategy with exaggerated flair. The first few rounds went to him easily. He played like a man who knew the game by heart. But by the fourth hand, Annalisa's brows furrowed, her posture straightened. By the fifth, she was winning, not by luck, by calculation. Her cheeks flushed with focus, her eyes sharp and bright, not with fear, but something dangerously close to joy. When she played a perfect trump, winning the trick with surgical precision, Davies laughed aloud, a warm, full-bellied laugh. Bloody hell, you're sharp, he said, beaming. Could have used you in intelligence. And then the explosion, not of volume, but of silence. Annalisa's smile evaporated. The cards froze in her hands. Her face crumpled, not in anger, but in horror. Davies saw it instantly. His expression fell. Sorry, love. I didn't mean... He faltered. There was no way to finish, no safe place to land. It's fine, Annalise murmured, but she stood, excused herself, and didn't return. Later, Greta found her lying on her bunk, eyes unfocused, staring at the ceiling as if trying to read the truth etched into the beams. Her diary was open across her chest. She read aloud. December 25th, 1944. They gave us Christmas, chicken, pudding, cards, laughter. I don't know how to hold this. I don't know where it fits. Beside what we did, what we believed, what we were. Corporal Davies said I was sharp, meant it kindly, but all I could think was, I was sharp enough to help them kill people more efficiently. I was sharp enough to be useful to monsters. And now the monsters are giving me Christmas dinner. Greta had no comfort to offer. She lay in her own bunk, surrounded by the dim remnants of candle wax and the lingering scent of evergreen. Someone snored softly nearby. Outside, snow dusted the ground. Inside, another kind of frost settled, one born not of cold, but of reckoning. The change spread like illness. Not dramatic, not theatrical. There were no tearful speeches or impassioned conversions, no shouted rejections of ideology. It was slow, invasive, inevitable. Dignity offered daily, where they had been trained to expect degradation. Humanity extended without ceremony, where they had braced for hatred. That was what unraveled them. Frida was the first to ask. One afternoon, folding linens in the weak January sun, she paused. If the British are treating us like this, she said softly, what were we doing to our prisoners? No one answered. They knew. Vaguely, whispers about the Eastern Front. Soviet prisoners starved. Labor battalions, freezing trains, disappearing men. But those details had always been hazy, intentionally so. You didn't ask if you wanted to stay safe. You didn't press too hard. Now those silences felt heavy, solid, unforgivable. Annalise couldn't leave it alone. She began asking questions, probing guards when she could, piecing together scraps of knowledge. She learned about the Geneva Conventions, the Red Cross, international law. A British Sergeant Morrison, older, weary, with a patience born of too many years, lent her a translated copy of the 1929 convention. She devoured it, underlined passages, memorized rights and obligations. One evening, she held the booklet out to Greta. We signed this, she said hollowly. Germany signed this in 1929. We agreed to all of it. Food, medical care, humane treatment. We agreed. And then, we didn't. We just didn't. Greta's voice was cautious. Some prisoners, she offered. Western ones. British. American. They were treated better. Sometimes. Annalise didn't blink. And Soviet prisoners? Jews? Poles? What about them? Greta had no answer. The silence stretched between them. Wide. Deep. A canyon impossible to bridge. Spring crept into Wiltshire. Crocuses pushed through frostbitten soil. The sun lingered longer in the sky, hesitant but curious. Beyond the wire, the war dragged on. They heard fragments, hints, rumors from guards, headlines in discarded papers, BBC voices muffled by static. Germany was losing. Everyone knew it. The Red Army surged from the east. The Americans and British closed from the west. The Reich was collapsing, folding inward like a dying star. In March, new prisoners arrived, fresh from the ruins of the Rhineland, gaunt, gray-skinned, hollow-eyed. Women who looked like shadows of themselves. Greta helped process them. She sat at her desk again, typing names, ranks, birth dates, watching disbelief bloom across weary faces as they were given coats. Warm food, real beds. She saw her own past reflected in every stunned glance. One girl, Helga, couldn't have been more than 19. Her face still soft with the remnants of youth, her uniform hanging from her frame. She looked up at Greta, eyes wide with suspicion. When does it get bad? She asked. When do they start hurting us? Greta looked at her, felt the coat on her shoulders, remembered jazz music, porridge, a Christmas tree. They don't, she said. This is it. This is how it is. Helga blinked. But we're enemies. Greta only nodded. Yes, she said. And still, this is how it is. We're German, Helga whispered. They should hate us. Greta nodded slowly, the truth still solidifying in her mouth like something sharp-edged and painful. They do, she said. Some of them, at least. I've seen it in their eyes. Morrison lost his son at Dunkirk. Davy's brother died in North Africa. They have every reason, every right to hate us. She looked down at her hands, at the pale skin mapped with small scars and calluses. But they follow the rules anyway. They treat us with dignity, not because we deserve it, but because they believe in something bigger than revenge. She hadn't known she believed it until she spoke it aloud. And once the words were out, they cut like broken glass on the tongue. The British weren't kind because they were soft or naive or brainwashed. They were kind because they had chosen to be, because they had built a system that demanded it, a framework of principle of law that applied even to enemies, even to them. And Germany, her Germany, had chosen the opposite, a system fueled by hatred, justified by hierarchy, founded on the denial of shared humanity. Helga's voice trembled. "I don't understand." Greta looked at her. "Neither did I," she said, "but you will." Victory in Europe came in May, VE Day, May 8, 1945. Germany surrendered unconditionally. The Reich, once sprawling and thunderous, fell into silence and occupation. Hitler was dead. The 1,000-year dream had lasted 12. The news arrived at Camp 23 via a BBC broadcast echoing from the mess hall radio. The British soldiers wept, hugged, shouted with joy. The German women sat still, quiet, swallowed whole by the weight of finality. That evening, Lieutenant Colonel Hartley appeared at the front of the mess hall. His uniform was immaculate, his face drawn, his posture carved from fatigue. He addressed them in clear, deliberate German. "The war is over," he said. "Germany has surrendered. You will remain here as prisoners until repatriation can be arranged, likely over the coming months. I know this news is not easy. I know some of you have families in the Soviet zone. I cannot promise what you will find when you return. But I can promise this. While you remain here, you will continue to be treated in accordance with international law. You will continue to be safe." He paused. Something in him faltered. His voice lowered. "Many of you have asked why. Why we clothed you, fed you, treated you with decency. The answer is simple. Yes, it is what the law requires. But more than that, it is what we chose to be. When we went to war, we made a decision, not to become what we were fighting, not to mirror the brutality we opposed. We chose to remain human. And I hope, when you return home, you remember that, and that you help build something better." The silence that followed was absolute. Greta felt the tears running down her cheeks, hot and undeserved. Beside her, Margot trembled like a tree in wind. Annalisa had buried her face in her hands. Hartley nodded once, then turned and walked away. In the background, the gramophone played something slow and aching. Vera Lynn, perhaps, singing of white cliffs in return. The British soldiers filed out silently. They left the German women behind to their grief, to their shame, to their reckoning. Repatriation began in July. Alphabetical, orderly, inevitable. They were given travel documents, escorted to trains, shipped to ports, put on boats bound for a homeland that no longer existed in the form they remembered. Greta's name came up on July 18, 1945, exactly 1 year and 1 day after her capture. She packed her few belongings, the uniform she'd been issued, a bundle of letters from her mother, Annalisa's diary, handed to her the night before, like sacred text. She folded the British Army coat, the same one she'd received that first cold morning in November, and left it on the edge of her bunk. A gesture of thanks, of closure. But at the gate, Corporal Davies found her. He pressed the coat into her arms. "Take it," he said. "You'll need it. Winters in Berlin are bloody cold." "I can't," she replied. "It's yours. British Army property." Davies shrugged. "War's over, love. Property doesn't matter anymore. People do. Take the coat. Remember that someone gave it to you when they didn't have to. And she did. She wore it on the train to Southampton, on the ship across the Channel, on the shattered, soot-covered journey through the skeleton of Germany, through towns where chimneys rose like broken fingers, through cities silent with loss. She wore it through the winter of 1945 to 46, the coldest in memory. A winter when coal was scarce, when walls could not hold back the wind, when thousands froze in unheated rooms, wrapped in memories and hunger. Greta wore that coat, and every day it clung to her shoulders, she remembered. Not just the war, Not just the defeat, but the mercy, the dignity, the impossible, defiant kindness. A kindness that arrived not in the moment of peace, but in the heart of war. The coat kept her alive, but more than that, it kept her honest. When Greta returned to Berlin, she stepped into a city unrecognizable. The skeletal remains of buildings loomed like accusations. Streets were canyons of rubble, soot embedded in every brick. The Reich had collapsed into dust and into a shame too vast to name. Yet against all odds, her mother was alive. Thinner, older, fragile in frame and voice, but alive. She lived in 2 rooms of their shattered apartment building, walls scorched, windows gone. A blanket over the doorway to keep the cold from seeping in, and Greta, wrapped in the same British Army coat that had first been handed to her in Wiltshire, began again. She found work with the American occupation authorities typing, once more, translating documents, filing forms, and slowly through whispered conversations and shared cigarettes, she met other women, other former prisoners, other captives of war, once in enemy hands on foreign soil. And their stories? Variations on a theme. We expected hell. We received humanity. We didn't deserve it, but we learned from it. Not everyone wanted to hear that. Some called them traitors, accused them of undermining German suffering, of forgetting the firebombed cities and the mothers who buried children under rubble. Others dismissed them outright. The idea of humane British camps ran counter to the easier narrative that war had turned everyone into monsters, that no side had remained clean. But Greta kept telling her story, over and over, holding up the coat as proof. In 1948, she married an American officer, moved to Ohio, lived a life that appeared from the outside, utterly ordinary, teaching German at a suburban high school, raising children in a house with white siding and a flag on the porch. She kept the coat in a trunk in the basement. Decades later, after her death in 1997, her children found it moth-eaten but intact. The British Army label still stitched inside the collar, a quiet testament, a fragment of history. Annalisa returned to Hamburg, became a nurse, then a pacifist, then a teacher who devoted herself to peace education. She published her diary in 1963 under the title, What They Gave Us When We Deserved Nothing. It was heavily annotated, carefully edited. It sold poorly. Veterans groups denounced it. She didn't care. Someone has to tell the truth, she said in a rare interview. Someone has to say, they were better than us. They chose to be better. And if we don't learn from that, we learn nothing at all. Margot never fully recovered. The collapse of her ideology had shattered something essential inside her, and no amount of logic or kindness could reassemble it. She lived quietly in Munich, worked in a library, corresponded with Greta and Annalisa for years, but rarely spoke of the war. When she died in 1979, her letters were donated to the German Historical Institute. Historians studying those archives found the same sentences again and again, repeated like prayers or confessions. We were wrong about everything. They showed us what we should have been. Why couldn't we see it before it was too late? History is full of moments that shatter certainty. This was one of them. Share this story with someone who believes kindness has no place in war, who needs reminding that even in darkness, the human heart can choose light. It began with a knock, metallic, deliberate, a sound like judgment. But what followed wasn't the vengeance Greta Hoffmann had been promised. It was breakfast, it was coats, it was ordinary decency extended across an abyss of guilt and grief. That ordinariness, that was the most devastating part, because it proved something terrifying and beautiful, that the line between barbarism and civilization is not fixed. It is not a national characteristic. It is not inherited. It is a choice, made daily, in small actions, in grand systems, in how we treat those we have been taught to hate. They cried over a knock. They wept over porridge, over a chocolate bar, over the gentle hands of a Welsh nurse bandaging a wound. Those moments didn't erase the horrors Germany had inflicted. They didn't absolve, but they proved another way had always been possible. Even in war, even across the enemy lines, it was possible to choose not cruelty, but law, not revenge, but restraint, not hatred, but the stubborn insistence that even enemies are still human. What happened in November 1944 at Camp 23 became one of the least recorded chapters of the POW experience, lost beneath the louder stories of victory and defeat. But for Greta, for Annalise, for Margot, it was the hinge, the axis on which everything turned. A revelation that the world was worse than they'd believed and better than they'd hoped. The coat hung in a basement in Ohio for decades. British wool, slowly disintegrating, thread by thread, into fiber, into memory. But the lesson it carried, that endured, still sharp, still necessary. In a world overflowing with reasons for cruelty, someone chose to give coats to those expected to freeze. That choice echoes a quiet, unyielding insistence that we can be better than our worst impulses, that civilization is proven not by how we treat friends, but how we treat those we are told to destroy. They were given coats, not bullets, and in that small, devastating kindness, everything changed.